You have driven that route 1,000 times. The traffic lights, the familiar turns, the same radio station filling the silence you're too tired to name. And somewhere between the second light and the highway ramp, it surfaces again. Quiet, almost gentle, and completely devastating. This cannot be it. Not the title on your badge, not the account balance that finally looks the way you told yourself it would need to look before you could breathe. Not the carefully constructed life that photographs beautifully and feels hollow the moment the camera is put away. You smile at the right moments, you answer the emails, you show up in every room that requires your presence, and you perform with a precision that has earned you real respect from real people. And yet, something behind your eyes carries a weight that none of it has ever been able to lift. You have tried to explain that weight away. You have called it ingratitude. You have called it overthinking. You have told yourself you are just tired and that rest will fix it, but rest does not fix it. Because that weight is not a symptom of exhaustion. It is the signal of a soul that knows the difference between a life that was assigned to you by a world that did not know your name and the life that was written for you before you took a single breath. The world handed you its scorecard early. Maybe it came from a parent who measured worth in achievement. Maybe it came from a school system that ranked you by output. Maybe it came from watching the people around you chase things with such certainty that you assumed they must know something you did not. So you took the scorecard. And because you carry something rare inside you, a drive, a depth, a hunger that has never quite fit neatly into any room you entered, you climbed. You climbed harder than most. You hit the marks. You checked the boxes with a discipline that other people noticed and quietly envied. But the higher you climbed on that ladder, the louder the devastation became. Because here is what no one told you when they handed you the scorecard. The world's ladder and heaven's ladder are not just different structures. They are leaning against completely different walls. Where the world celebrates performance, your calling demands authenticity. Where the world rewards independence, your purpose requires surrender. Where the world measures you by what you produce in the light, God measures you by who you are becoming in the secret places where no audience exists and no applause is possible. And here is the word I need you to hold before we go any further, because it is the word that changes everything. Your restlessness is not a malfunction. It is not anxiety. It is not evidence that you are broken or behind or somehow losing a race everyone else seems to understand. That nagging, persistent, will not be quiet sense that there has to be more. That is your spirit refusing to settle for a counterfeit existence. You were designed for alignment with something eternal, and no amount of temporary success can permanently silence the part of you that knows the difference. The restlessness is not your enemy. The restlessness is God's mercy. It is the compass that keeps pointing north, even when you have spent years trying to convince yourself that the direction you are walking is fine. It is the signal that you were built for more than applause, more than the approval of rooms that will forget your name the moment you are no longer useful to them, more than the exhausting performance of becoming whoever each environment needs you to be so that no one looks too closely at the gap between the face you show and the soul underneath. That is why in the trilogy, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, the link is in the pinned comment, I explain why the chosen ones always feel this specific weight. And more importantly, why the weight itself is the doorway and not the obstacle. The strategies in that material were built for the person who is tired of performing a life they did not choose. Go find it. It was placed there for you. Now I want to walk with you into the seasons that broke you. Not quickly, not with the kind of theological efficiency that wraps suffering in a bow before the wound has finished bleeding. I want to sit with you in the actual memory of it, the betrayal that came from someone whose loyalty you had never once questioned. You did not see it coming because you were not built to calculate people that way. You trusted completely the way people who carry light tend to trust, because suspicion feels foreign to a soul that operates from love. And then the floor gave way. Not slowly, all at once. And the part that stayed with you, the part that still surfaces in quiet moments, was not just the loss of the relationship, it was the confusion. The sincere, searching confusion of a person who had done everything right, asking why the outcome looked so wrong. You went over it in your mind thousands of times. You found your own small errors and you magnified them, because at some level it felt more bearable to be at fault than to accept that faithfulness does not always produce the outcome faithfulness deserves. Your body held that confusion in specific places, in the tightness behind your sternum, in the way food lost its flavor for weeks, in the shower at 2 in the morning, where the water covered the sound so that no one in the house had to know how much it actually cost you. But I need to tell you something about every person who was removed from your life during your seasons of preparation, something the enemy worked overtime to prevent you from seeing clearly. Their removal was not evidence that you were unlovable. It was evidence that God takes your assignment seriously enough to clear the path. Every relationship that drained more than it deposited, every alliance that required you to make yourself smaller to maintain it, every connection that kept pulling you back toward a version of yourself you had already outgrown, those were not losses. They were surgical removals performed by a healer who could see exactly what those ties were doing to the purpose he placed inside you. The enemy wanted you to experience the removal as rejection so that you would spend your energy grieving something God intentionally released. Because a chosen one consumed with the wound of abandonment is a chosen one too occupied to walk into the room they were prepared for. Consider the doors that slammed, the opportunity that seemed so precisely aligned with everything you had been working toward that you did not even bother bracing yourself for a no. And then came the no, clean and final and utterly inexplicable. The prayers that rose out of you with genuine faith and seemed to dissolve into the ceiling without a sound. The dream you had carried for so long with such specific detail that its continued absence started to feel like evidence that you had imagined the whole thing. You began to reinterpret your own history. You started to wonder if the sense of calling you had felt so clearly was just ambition dressed in spiritual language. That reinterpretation was the enemy's greatest success in that season. Not the closed door itself, but convincing you that the closed door meant the destination was fictional. Every delay was mercy wearing a disguise you did not yet have the eyes to recognize. Every no was God saying not yet rather than not you. Every season of wilderness was a classroom where the curriculum could not have been delivered any other way, because the only teacher capable of building certain things into your character is lived experience at the limit of your endurance. Joseph did not walk from the pit to the palace across a comfortable afternoon. He sat in a cistern while his brothers ate a meal nearby. He served faithfully in Potiphar's house and was rewarded with false accusation and imprisonment. He interpreted a dream for a man who forgot him for 2 years after the interpretation proved accurate. At no point in that sequence did the preparation look proportionate to the promise. From the outside and from inside the experience, it looked like a life falling consistently and inexplicably apart. But every layer of that seemingly random suffering was installing something specific into Joseph's capacity. The betrayal by his brothers installed the wisdom to govern without vengeance. The false imprisonment installed an intimacy with God that prosperity would have crowded out. The years of waiting installed a patience and a steadiness that would allow him to steward unprecedented influence without being destroyed by it. God did not give Joseph the palace before Joseph had the character to inhabit it without the palace inhabiting him. The delay was not punishment. The delay was the most precise and costly kind of love. And David, anointed king while still smelling of sheep, still the youngest son in a family that did not think to call him when the prophet arrived, spent years in caves after that anointing. years running for his life from the very king whose court he had served with loyalty and music and genuine love. His psalms were not written from thrones. They were written from hiding places, from the specific loneliness of a person who has received a promise and then lived inside the apparent contradiction of that promise for long enough that faith becomes the most expensive thing you own. The Psalms exist because David sat in the tension between what God said and what David could see, and chose again and again to anchor himself to what God said, not without struggle, not without the raw, unfiltered expression of a soul in genuine anguish, but without abandoning the anchor. That is the inheritance waiting for you in your own wilderness season, not the absence of anguish, but the development of an anchor strong enough to hold you through it. Now let me speak to the loneliness that has settled over your social life in ways that have quietly alarmed you. The tolerance for surface-level conversation has evaporated so completely that you cannot pretend otherwise anymore. Small talk does not just bore you, it exhausts you at a cellular level in that specific way that means your whole system is working against the performance. You have been canceling plans. You have been choosing silence over gatherings. You have watched yourself pull back from relationships that used to feel normal and wondered if you are becoming someone cold, someone difficult, someone whose inner life has finally frightened away the warmth that used to come naturally. Nothing is wrong with you. Your spirit is maturing. The pulling away is not isolation, it is incubation. And there is a biological reality underneath it that deserves acknowledgement. Your nervous system is recalibrating. The stimulation that once felt neutral now registers as noise because your internal frequency has shifted. The conversations that used to satisfy a social hunger now leave a specific kind of emptiness, the emptiness of a person who just ate something that had the texture of food, but none of the nutrition. Your body is telling you what your spirit already knows, that you have outgrown certain environments, and that the energy you would spend maintaining your place in them is energy that belongs to the next season of your purpose. As I teach deeply in the material, the 3 keys to a prosperous life, I left the link for you in the pinned comment. This pain of not belonging, the specific ache of feeling too much for the rooms you are in, is not a curse. It is the defining mark of the light bearer, and the material will show you exactly what to do with it. The light bearer dynamic is one of the most misunderstood experiences of the chosen life, and I want to describe it with the precision it deserves. When you walk into a room carrying genuine light, the kind that comes not from performance or personality, but from actual proximity to God, something happens in the spiritual atmosphere that has very concrete social consequences. Light does not just illuminate, it reveals. And the people in that room who have built their comfort on things that cannot survive illumination will feel your presence as a threat before they consciously understand why. They will not be able to name it. They will express it as criticism. They will frame it as concern. They will deliver it through the language of advice. You are too sensitive, you think too much, you take things too seriously, you need to come back down to earth. The packaging is caring. The content is a demand that you make yourself smaller so that their darkness feels less exposed. And because you are someone who genuinely loves people, who genuinely wants connection, who genuinely does not desire conflict, you have more than once actually listened to that advice. You have tried to tone yourself down. You have tried to be less. And every time you tried, you felt the specific wrongness of a person wearing a coat that is not their size, moving through a life that fits someone else. That criticism disguised as wisdom has a name in the ancient narrative. It is the same energy that looked at Joseph and said, "Here comes the dreamer." It is the same voice that looked at David and said, "I know your arrogance and the wickedness of your heart." It is the same collective spirit that looked at Jesus, at the embodied presence of perfect love, walking through actual dust on actual roads, and said, "He has a demon. He eats with sinners. He is a threat to the order we have built." The rejection of the light bearer by the collective is not an accident of personality or circumstance. It is a predictable, patterned response to the specific discomfort that genuine holiness produces in environments that have made peace with their compromise. You were not rejected because you were too much. You were rejected because what you carry is incompatible with what they were protecting. Those are not the same thing. And the enemy spent years trying to get you to internalize the rejection as evidence of your excess rather than evidence of your assignment. The hidden envy masked as advice is perhaps the most costly thing a chosen one can absorb, because it enters through a door that love opened. It does not come from strangers. It comes from family members at holiday tables who cannot name why your peace irritates them. It comes from long-term friends whose encouragement started to carry a subtle ceiling, the encouragement that supports you right up to the point where your growth would exceed their comfort with the comparison. It comes from colleagues who admire your gifts abstractly and work quietly against your advancement specifically. And because you are discerning, because you feel things at a depth that others do not, you sensed it long before you were willing to name it. You sat with the dissonance of loving people genuinely while feeling something in their energy that did not match their words. You gave them the benefit of the doubt repeatedly, which is a mark of your character, not a weakness. But there is a moment when discernment becomes a responsibility, when the loving thing is not to keep offering your vulnerability to people who have demonstrated they do not know how to steward it. The scriptures describe it in the story of Lot's wife with a brevity that contains an entire theology of looking back. She was being delivered. The destruction was behind her. The future was in front of her. And she turned. One turn, and she became a pillar of salt, frozen in the posture of longing for what was being left behind, preserved in the exact moment of her attachment to a fire that was never meant to be her home. I want you to feel the weight of that image, rather than pass through it quickly. The old fire of false approval, the validation that came from rooms that required your diminishment as the price of belonging. That fire is not just behind you. It is still warm enough to feel like home when the new territory feels unfamiliar. The pull to turn back is not weakness. It is the deeply human need for the familiar. But the familiar was a form of captivity, and every glance backward is a glance away from the face of the one who is leading you forward. There is a specific grief in leaving behind the version of yourself that performed for approval, because that version of you worked so hard and deserved so much more than it received. There is grief in admitting that the ladder you climbed was leaning against the wrong wall. There is grief in releasing the relationships that were never going to be able to honor what you actually carry. I'm not asking you to skip the grief. I'm asking you not to build a residence inside it. The grief is a door, not a dwelling. Walk through it fully without bypassing it, and walk out the other side into the territory that your preparation has been aimed at all along. The pruning you have been feeling in your relational life is not the end of connection. It is the clearing of the ground for the right connections, the sacred new tribe that is already moving toward you through the same wilderness you are navigating. They are the ones who were also shaped in the fire. They are the ones who will recognize something in your eyes before you finish your first sentence, who will not require you to perform or shrink or explain the parts of yourself that the old rooms could not hold. The loneliness you are sitting in right now is not your final address. It is the liminal space between who you were shaped by and who you were shaped for. The silence of this season is not the silence of abandonment. It is the silence of preparation, the specific quiet that precedes a sound that will carry further than anything the noise of the old life could have reached. If you study the trilogy The Three Keys to a Prosperous Life, which link is in the pinned comment, you will see that the transition from the fear of solitude to the empowered acceptance of sacred preparation is one of the most reliably documented patterns in the lives of every person who walked fully into their assignment. The loneliness is not a life sentence, it is a threshold. God does not remove things from your life carelessly. Every removal, every relationship, every door, every season that ended before you were ready was a move made by a craftsman who can see the finished piece from the first cut. The protective removal is the hardest mercy to receive because it arrives wearing the face of loss. When the person you loved walked away, or the position you had built disappeared, or the community that had been your anchor disbanded, it did not feel like protection. It felt like the ground giving way beneath a life you had worked hard to build on solid foundation. But the foundation was not what you believed it was. And the craftsman could see that. He could see the specific ways those roots were growing into the purpose he planted in you and beginning to choke what was meant to flower. The removal was not punishment. The removal was the most urgent possible expression of his care for what he placed inside you. I want to speak now about the specific texture of what is being built in you during this season of apparent stillness. Because from the outside, and possibly from inside your own experience, this season does not look like construction. It looks like waiting. It looks like the absence of momentum. It looks like watching other people's highlight reels scroll past, while your own life seems to be running in a holding pattern that you did not choose and cannot explain. But there is something being deposited in your character during this waiting that cannot be installed any other way. Patience, not the passive, resigned tolerance of a person who has simply given up on urgency, but the active, rooted, unshakable steadiness of a person who has learned to trust the craftsman's timeline over their own. That quality is being forged in you right now, and it will be the quality that allows you to steward the next season without being destroyed by it. Because the next season carries weight, it carries influence and responsibility and the specific vulnerability of a life lived with genuine exposure. And the only thing that will keep that weight from crushing you is the depth of root that can only grow in seasons of waiting. The version of you that is emerging from this preparation is going to encounter rooms that the old version could not have navigated. Not because the rooms are easier. In many ways they will be harder, more exposed, more demanding. But because the capacity being built in you through these very specific hardships is precisely the capacity those rooms require. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not being passed over. You are being prepared with a specificity and intentionality that the waiting makes invisible, but the arrival will make undeniable. The preparation always looks disproportionate to the calling until you are standing in the fullness of what was prepared. And then it makes perfect, complete, breathtaking sense. Your actual assignment, the one that was written in permanent ink before the first cell of your body was formed, is not a destination on the other side of this season. It is not a position you will finally reach when all the preparation is complete. It is a posture. It is walking in daily rhythm with the one who designed you with specific, unrepeatable intentionality. Not performing for him, not presenting him with your productivity as evidence that you deserve his presence. Walking with him, knowing him the way you know someone whose voice you recognize before they finish their first word. Reflecting his presence, not in the highlight moments, but in the ordinary Tuesday afternoon. In the way you move through the grocery store, in the patience you extend to the person who cuts you off in traffic, in the peace you carry that your current circumstances do not logically explain. That peace, the one that makes people look at your life and quietly ask what is different about you, that is purpose made visible. Not a highlight reel, a steady, faithful, unhurried walk through every season. The world will not always understand it. There will be people who look at the life you are building and cannot reconcile its quietness with the significance you seem to carry. They will offer you their scorecard again. They will point to metrics of success that feel increasingly foreign to the life you are being called into. And you will feel in those moments the old pull, the pull toward proving yourself on their terms, toward achieving something visible enough to silence the part of you that still carries their assessment. I am asking you to notice that pull without following it. I am asking you to recognize the offer and decline it with the specific authority of a person who knows that the applause of the room they are standing in is not the applause they were built for. The applause of heaven is worth more than any standing ovation the earth could offer. And that standing ovation is not reserved for the end of the story. It is available right now, in the faithfulness of this ordinary moment, in the choice to trust when trust is costly, in the decision to stay rooted when the storm makes movement feel like safety. Stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop measuring your progress against a timeline that was designed for a completely different assignment. Your lane is your lane. Your timeline is your timeline. And what God is engineering in your life, with the specific raw material of your specific history and your specific wounds and your specific gifts, has nothing to do with what He is engineering in theirs. The comparison is not just unproductive, it is a form of ingratitude for the exact path that is developing exactly what you need for exactly what you were made for. There has always been enough. The resources, the connections, the opportunities, the favor, all of it is already accounted for in the plan written before you needed any of it. The scarcity you feel is a lie the enemy tells in the wilderness to get you to make moves driven by panic rather than led by peace. What God is waiting for is your full yes, not a partial surrender with conditions attached, not a conditional trust that holds back the parts of your dream that feel too precious to release. Not the version of faith that follows Him as long as the path makes sense. He is waiting for the complete, unguarded, open-handed handing over of the life you planned for the life you were actually created to live. And I know that feels like the most terrifying sentence in this entire conversation, because the life you planned is at least legible. You can see its outline. You know its risks. The life you were created to live is ahead of you in territory you have not yet mapped, toward a version of yourself you have not yet become, requiring a level of trust that your current faith is still growing into. But the terror you feel at the edge of that surrender is not a warning. It is the feeling of standing at the exact threshold where every chosen one before you stood, at the moment when the known path ends and the called path begins. The fire you walked through did not destroy you. Every betrayal, every closed door, every season of wilderness, every relationship that ended before you were ready, every prayer that seemed to dissolve before it reached the ceiling, none of it destroyed you. You're still here. You are reading these words with eyes that carry the specific depth of a person who has been through something real and come out the other side, still reaching. That is not nothing. That is everything. That is the proof that what lives in you is stronger than what came against you. That is the evidence that the preparation is already working, that the capacity being built in you through each of those seasons is already present in the quality of your survival. You did not just endure, you were being shaped, and the shaping is nearly complete. The new tribe is coming. The connections that are calibrated to the frequency you are currently carrying. The ones who will not need you to explain yourself, who will recognize the light in you before you introduce it, who are also emerging from their own wilderness seasons with the same scars and the same fire and the same unshakable knowing that there is more. They are already in motion toward you. The sacred community of the next season does not look like the social architecture of the last one. It will not be built on proximity or convenience or shared history or the mutual performance of people who need each other to maintain a particular self-image. It will be built on shared assignment, on the recognition that happens when two people who carry the same purpose find each other in the territory that purpose leads to. You are not meant to do this alone. The solitude of this season was never meant to be your permanent address. It was the sacred preparation room for connections that can only be sustained by people who have done the work you are currently doing. And when those connections come, when the new tribe assembles around the shared fire of genuine purpose, you will understand with a clarity that the previous seasons could not have given you why everything that ended had to end. You will see the architecture of it. You will see the specific ways that every removal created space for what was coming. You will see how the loneliness of the wilderness season built in you the capacity for depth of connection that the crowded seasons never could have produced. You will look back, not with the turning of Lot's wife, not with the longing that freezes you in the posture of what was, but with the eyes of a person who has arrived somewhere, looking back from solid ground at the terrain that was always leading here. You will see it clearly, and you will be grateful for all of it. The systemic chains of your family line, the patterns of scarcity, of shame, of smallness, of settling that were handed down through generations of people who never had the tools or the revelation to break them. Those chains are breaking in you. You were not born into your family by accident. You were placed there with a specific assignment to be the one who breaks the pattern, to carry the thing that ends the generational inheritance of limitation and begins a new inheritance of freedom and purpose that will flow forward into generations you will never meet. That weight is real. The loneliness of being the one who sees what others in your family cannot yet see, who carries what others in your family are not yet equipped to carry, who is being asked to walk a road that has no family precedent to follow. That loneliness is real, and it is costly, and it deserves to be named, but so does the honor of it. So does the specific singular privilege of being the one in your line who God chose to begin something new. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not too late. You are standing right now at the edge of the most significant season of your life, not because everything has been fixed and all the wounds have healed and all the questions have been answered, but because the preparation has produced in you exactly the person that the next season requires. The version of you that enters this new territory has been formed in fire. It has been tested in the wilderness. It has been stripped of the false identity that the world assigned to it and is now walking in something closer to the truth of who it actually is. The stripping away was not the tragedy. The stripping away was the mercy. What remains after everything that was not truly you has been removed? That is the gift. That is the one that the next season,